I'm very glad to have the opportunity today to deliver some opening remarks at this event and to moderate it. It's an event that is taking place in the margin of the work of the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. And the title, as you know, is New Rights-Based Technical Cooperation Tools to Support Implementation of the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. Although we are going also to speak a lot about trafficking. And today's event is co-organized by UNODC, IOM, and the Regional Support Office of the Bali Process. And myself, for those who don't know me, I am the head, Francesco Luciani, I'm the head of the unit in charge of migration and forces placement at the Directorate General International Partnerships of the European Commission. And I would like to start by this. I mean, by stressing that the European Union is really engaged and in the topic of prevention of fight against the smuggling of migrants, and very happy to work with the partners in addressing this phenomenon. The importance of fighting against migrant smuggling has been very for long term repeated by our policy documents, and that the European Union has reiterated its priority on this recently under the new EU Pact on Migration and Asylum that has been presented in September last year. We are determined to combat against migrant smuggling because indeed this put at risk the rule of law in the countries of origin, transit, and destination, but also because frequently it implies exploitation and threats also for the life and dignity of the migrants. Indeed, trafficking regularly takes place in connection with smuggling. This is a criminal activity that we have to fight in a very determined manner without compromise. And to that end, we are putting in place a new action plan to counter smuggling that will start this year and will continue at least until 2025, and that will focus on combating criminal networks, boost cooperation with partner countries, and support the work of law enforcement. My role for this introduction stops already here, and it will be important also to catch up with the small delays at the beginning to rush towards the introduction. And I think it's important to let me just add a few points on the fact that, as I said, the focus is on smuggling, but we are working also on trafficking. The two things are interlinked. The European Union is also putting in place a new action plan on trafficking in human beings, with the focus on particularly not simply on breaking the business model of trafficking, but also countering in general the culture of impunity, and also enhancing the protection given to victims that sometimes are still forgotten in many countries. We are also determined, that I would like also to stress before starting the presentation, on building up partnerships. I mean, we know very well that without the mutual assistance between all the countries involved, we can hardly achieve any practical result. That goes from the cooperation between law enforcement agencies until the cooperation between judicial authorities in collecting evidence and ensuring also the effective prosecution of the smugglers and of the traffickers. We need to work more also on preventing this phenomenon, and preventing and especially persuading the migrants not to fall into the trap of the smugglers and the traffickers too easily. We are also to stress very strongly, and that's a little bit is the link with the event of today, with the need to put at the center of our work the protection of human rights and the needs of the people involved. I mean, this rights-based approach is what is inspiring our work and is really inspiring also the presentation today. I conclude by stressing that the discussion today will be focused on the presentation of a certain number of tools that I will introduce in a second, giving the floor to the speakers. Some of these tools have been presented, have been elaborated also with the help of a project funded by the European Union, the GLOW Act, followed then by a second edition of the same project focusing on Asia and Middle East, the GLOW Act 2. And we are very proud of this, and also of the collaboration that we continue under the ongoing project. So I stop here, and I will now give the floor to the four speakers that will make each of them a presentation. Let me say a few words, really telegraphically, of the four speakers. About the four speakers. First of all, we will have Mrs. Marika McAdam, that will present the UNODC toolkit for mainstreaming human rights and gender equality into criminal justice intervention to address trafficking in people and smuggling of migrants. Mrs. McAdam is an independent consultant that has worked for many organizations, from UNODC to IOM to other organizations. She will be followed by Mrs. Heather Komenda, IOM Migrant Protection and Assistance Specialist. She will present the IOM's Handbook on Protection and Assistance for Migrants Vulnerable to Violence, Exploitation and Abuse. Then we will have Mr. Jake Sherman, that is a career officer with the Australian Department of Home Affairs and co-manager of the Regional Support Office for the Bali Process. And his presentation will focus on understanding the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. And finally, we will have Mr. Jahangir Alam, Additional Secretary with focus on political and ICT for Public Security Division of the Ministry of Home Affairs of Bangladesh. And he will kindly give us an anticipation of early findings of the Bangladesh National Study on Trafficking in Persons, including a chapter on mixed migration flows and links to smuggling of migrants under the GLOW Act Bangladesh project. I would like to invite all the speakers to limit the presentation to 5 to 7 minutes. Those not having the floor in that moment to unmute themselves. We will try to have all the presentation made by 2 p.m. I don't know whether there will be time for question and answers. It will depend also on the speakers now, but let's try. So I will stop immediately now, and I would like to invite Mrs. Marika McAdam to present the UNODC toolkit for mainstreaming human rights and gender equality into criminal justice intervention to address trafficking human beings and smuggling of migrants. Please, Ms. McAdam, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luciani, and thank you for the introduction. Moreover, thank you for reading the entire title of the tool that I'm presenting, because it is a very long one, and I was hoping to be spared that ordeal. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so delighted and proud to present this tool. Ilya, could you just go back to the first tool? I just want to look at the title again. Just to explain what this is. this toolkit, in a way, answers a question that we've all been asking ourselves. For many years now, we've heard these terms, rights-based and gender equal approaches, and this toolkit is in some ways an attempt to practically answer what that means when it comes down to the practice of criminal justice interventions to these two crime types. The focus is on criminal justice in line with the international frameworks with which we deal. And in that, we're very cognizant of the fact that where these justice approaches are not justice-based and are not rights-based, then they can be rights reductive. I should also note that the toolkit addresses both trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants together for three reasons. Firstly, because in the international law, they are captured in sibling instruments to the same parent convention. Secondly, because our experience in UNODC and from partner organisations is that very often the stakeholders who are addressing one of these crime types evolve and become the stakeholders who address the other. So there's those overlapping experiences, and therefore that presents us with an opportunity to raise capacity and understanding in both crime types. And the third reason that we're confronting these two phenomena together is because they overlap in practice. It's very difficult and in some ways a bit disingenuous to try to talk about one without talking about the other, particularly when we're talking about mixed migration flows. And we know that smuggled migrants are indeed highly vulnerable to being trafficked. So that's just a bit of a background. Thanks, Yulia. The next slide. So what this toolkit aims to do is essentially guide users to take rights-based and gender-responsive approaches to criminal justice activities, whether that is working on legislation or policy or capacity building or whatever it may be. The primary target audience of this resource is UNODC staff and those from partner organisations, including those who we consulted with. But moreover, it is also directed at state actors, states, of course, being the primary duty bearers when it comes to human rights obligations. As you can see, we consulted with a wide range of counterparts on this issue, and as a result, I think the tool really takes a multidisciplinary approach. And we had the benefit of a soft piloting process in the development of this. Unfortunately, for obvious reasons, the piloting that we had initially planned was somewhat waylaid, but we still managed to achieve some insights from GLOAC countries, so from Afghanistan, Iraq and Pakistan, but also beyond GLOAC countries, including from Southeast Asia and Ethiopia. And at that stage, that really confirmed to us that there is a value add in what we are offering here beyond the GLOAC region. But moreover, for me as the author of this tool, that opportunity really let me close the gap between theories that you can write about on paper that don't really speak to what's happening on the ground. So I hope we went quite far in closing that gap. Thank you, Ilya. So in a nutshell, what we arrived at was 26 tools across 4 parts. Now, these tools are designed so that they can be used individually, but come together as a whole so they can speak in combination. To walk through the 4 parts very briefly, the first offers essentially tools for understanding. So that's narrative sections on some of the rights-based issues that arise in criminal justice response. And here we are also fully aware of the unintended consequences and some of the rights harms that may result when we get things wrong. The second part offers a bunch of analytical tools. Now, this is really a response to the fact that while human rights obligations are universal and the same across the world, how they are achieved and how they are pursued differs depending on the context. And so here we are really looking at the economic, cultural, social, civil, political, legal and institutional variance in jurisdictions and allowing users to calibrate their responses in accordance with their human rights and gender landscape on the ground. Thanks, Ilya. The third part is where we really walk users through a risk assessment and offer some potential strategies that they can use to mitigate those risks. And that's in really kind of a granular approach to activities. And here as well, we listen to what we were hearing and we understand the pragmatic reality that talking about human rights can be quite challenging and not everybody is open to this conversation. So here we offer a tool where we can advocate for rights-based approaches, not just because states have obligations to rights holders, but also because rights-based approaches are in the interests of counter-smuggling and indeed counter-trafficking criminal justice response. And finally, the fourth part is a monitoring and evaluation and learning tool. And here what we offer is not a counter-smuggling 101 or a counter-trafficking 101, but we offer guidance on overlaying and mainstreaming indicators of human rights impacts of our broader counter-trafficking, counter-smuggling responses. So again, really practical indicators for users to tailor to their approach. So finally, Ilya, next slide. Just to give a very brief snapshot of some of the human rights considerations that we've wound throughout this toolkit. We look at things like the criminalization challenges and the risks involved of criminalizing the wrong people and the diversion of precious, often rare criminal justice resources that may not end up targeting organized smugglers, but may end up detracting from an effective response. We explore, for instance, the human rights opportunities in prevention. How can human rights be explored as a way of addressing demand, not just for smuggling services, but for readily vulnerable and exploitable migrant labour forces? How is all of this wound up in what we understand when we talk about prevention? Identification and referral. We hear time and time again that failure to effectively identify vulnerable groups, people with needs, including victims of trafficking, is a cause of serious human rights risk and often violation. So how can we interplay this? How can we better identify traffic victims among smuggled migrants? Detention and return. We all know the Smuggling Protocol speaks to both detaining and returning smuggled migrants. When that happens, what does it look like to do that in accordance with human rights? And finally, access to justice. And here we take a really broad approach, not just to look at the rights of migrants to access justice, but also the rights of persons accused to access justice. And this is a call to us to look at human rights issues in rights to fair trial, making sure that our prosecutions, our defences, our sentences are approached with a human rights-based response. So that's, in a nutshell, what we're offering. I hope you've used the QR code to download this tool. And I also want to stress to you that we are very eager to receive feedback. This toolkit is the product of what is now 20 years worth of learning what it means to implement the Smuggling Protocol. What does that look like? Where have we gone wrong? We have learnt so much, but we invariably will continue to learn more, and I hope that you'll take the opportunity to tell us how we can make this toolkit a repository of our collective learning and progression on these issues. Thank you so much. I'm ready to relinquish the floor to the next speaker. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Many thanks also for keeping the time. And please, I would like to invite now Mrs. Ed Comenda to the following presentation that will focus on IOM's Handbook on protection and assistance for migrants vulnerable to violence, exploitation, and abuse. Please.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me and see my slides.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks. So I would like to start out first by acknowledging the support of many of the partners in the room for the development of the publications and accompanying tools that I will discuss. So this was developed within the framework of GLOACT, the project I already mentioned, in partnership with the EU, UNODC, and UNICEF. So what I will do is three things. First, I will introduce the flagship publications that were developed under that project. Then I'll drill down a little bit into the tools that accompany the publications and a few next steps, because this has really established a work stream that continues to grow. So first off, the big flagship publication is the IOM Handbook on the Protection and Assistance of Migrants Vulnerable to Violence, Exploitation, and Abuse. And I'd like to speak a little bit first about this terminology of migrants vulnerable to violence, exploitation, and abuse. And where this comes from is a concern with the vulnerability and the protection requirements of various types of migrants, and an attempt to not be as focused on categories, but instead to look at individuals and households first and foremost as individuals and households, regardless of migration status, regardless of any other characteristics. Now, this is important to note because this specifically and importantly includes smuggled migrants who are very often excluded or not specifically targeted for protection and assistance services. So we see this as a contribution to the very important work of recognizing that smuggled migrants have human rights that require protecting, and they very often have very specific protection requirements related to their status as smuggled migrants. So the handbook really focuses on and is built upon two approaches. The first is the Determinants of Migrant Vulnerability model. And what we aim to do with this model is to provide a framework for assessing migrant vulnerability to violence, exploitation, and abuse. The idea is to be able to predict which migrants would have an increased risk of vulnerability within a migration context, but also to identify migrants who are already, they've already left, they've already begun their migration journey, or they are in the country of destination, to assess if they actually have protection and assistance needs related to an experience of violence, exploitation, or abuse. Now, this framework is built upon an ecological model that looks at certain factors at individual, household, community, or structural levels. For example, individual factors can include age, sex, education levels. Household factors can include gender dynamics within the household and equitable approaches or inequitable approaches to distributing resources and participating in decision making. Community factors consider things such as peace and stability within the community, cultural issues, and the relationship between the community and the natural environment, such as any natural hazards or others that might be present. And at the structural level, this looks at the broadest level with the economic, cultural, and social structures, political, economic issues that shape individuals' migration decisions and behaviors. So this approach is underpinned by certain specific tools that we can use to map out migrant vulnerability to violence, exploitation, and abuse. On the one hand, we have research and assessment tools that are meant for researchers, planners, policymakers, etc., to get a snapshot overview of what factors exist at these four different levels that can intensify or decrease migrant vulnerability to violence, exploitation, and abuse. On the other hand, we have a set of screening and assistance tools that's meant more for frontline officers, those caseworkers, those immigration officers, those police officers, those social workers who may be interacting face-to-face with migrants or other vulnerable populations and who need to gather individual information to assess vulnerability, understand migrants' histories, and provide the best protection and assistance services. But another key component of the handbook is the protection and assistance framework. So it doesn't stop at only understanding and assessing vulnerability to violence, exploitation, and abuse. It also provides programmatic parameters and recommendations how this vulnerability can be addressed and reduced over time at all of these different levels for individuals, for their families, for their communities, and at the national/structural level. And even though you can't see it, it's important to note that this handbook is quite grand in scope, and it's not only a framework for action for IOM, for UNODC, for our partners, but for anybody concerned with protection and assistance of vulnerable migrants. This is states, the private sector, international organizations, and civil society. And the handbook does offer in each of the different chapters on the different levels an overview of how different partners can engage in different elements of a comprehensive response to protection and assistance of vulnerable migrants. I'll pop back up to the first slide. I'd also like to highlight that we have two much smaller complementary guidance documents. The first is on guidance for referral mechanisms. So very often with protection and assistance, one of the first things that countries do is work on referral mechanisms to assist with the identification and referral of those in need of assistance. And this provides very quick targeted, I would say, light guidance on how to engage in that process and what should be included in a referral document. This can be subnational, national, or transnational. And another document is the guidance on response planning. So we don't take a blanket approach and say everybody needs a full suite of responses to migrant vulnerability. We recognize that there are hotspots, there are different subnational areas that may be producing migrants vulnerable to violence, exploitation, or abuse, or where persons are more affected by exploitation. And there can be regional issues as well. So this is, again, a light, quick guidance document primarily targeted at states on how they can do kind of a needs assessment, understand what the vulnerability factors are, and how they can engage in a planning process, such as, say, a national plan of action. And lastly, the last thing I would like to discuss is some of the future work we'll be doing. We are very pleased that we are translating this into many different languages, starting with IOM's official languages, French and Spanish, but also Portuguese and Russian. And we aim to develop this year or next year a very comprehensive methodology document. We do have tools for policymakers to conduct assessments, but we don't yet have a full methodological guide, and that should be happening in the next little while. So that is a quick overview of the tools for protection and assistance of migrants vulnerable to violence, exploitation, and abuse, including smuggled migrants with protection needs. Thank you.
Many thanks for this quick but dense overview, and of course, all the audience is invited then to go directly to the text that have been quickly presented today. And I'm happy to pass the floor now to our third speaker, Mr. Jake Sherman, that will focus on understanding the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. Please, Mr. Sherman.
Okay, thank you. Just before I start, you can hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Look, well, as I'll just get my slides up if I could, please. Are my slides on your screen? They don't appear to be displaying here.
No, there is still the previous presentation.
Okay.
Visible on the screen.
Do you want me to help put them on the screen?
Yeah, if you could, please. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I will kick off then. Look, as introduced, my name is Jake Sharman, and my role is the Australian co-manager of the Regional Support Office based here in Bangkok. Building upon today's theme of new rights-based technical cooperation tools to support implementation of the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol, I'm really pleased to share the Bali Process's, or RSO's, publication titled Understanding the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol, which we developed jointly with the UNODC Regional Office for Southeast Asia and the Pacific. First, I'll give quick thanks to the organisers for today and my fellow panellists from the Government of Bangladesh, IOM and UNODC. And thank you for skipping to the second slide. I sense some of you who are not based in Southeast Asia are probably wondering who is the Bali Process and what is the RSO. So to save you from Googling, I will use a small part of my 5 minutes to give you a short introduction on what the Bali Process is and the RSO. Established in 2002, the Bali Process is a dialogue within our Southeast Asian region on people smuggling, trafficking in persons and related transnational crime. It's permanently co-chaired by the foreign ministers of Australia and Indonesia. From a small membership base within our region at creation, it's now grown substantially over its close to 20-year history and now has 45 member states, 4 international organisations and a number of observers and other international organisations. So where does the RSO fit into this? In 2012, members decided to establish us as a member-driven resource based in the region to provide or coordinate technical support, policy guidance, and facilitate the sharing of operational experience amongst our members to support their efforts to address smuggling and trafficking in persons. My role as the co-manager, and I also have an Indonesian counterpart who couldn't be with us today. I encourage you to review our strategic plan and annual work plan for 2021 to see what the RSO is doing on these issues in our region. And both of these documents are available on our website, which I will share at the end. Next slide, thanks, Sylvie. One of the core objectives of the Bali process, of course, is to strengthen cooperation to combat migrant smuggling. And of course, the longevity of the Bali process demonstrates a strong regional commitment for cooperation to combating these transnational crime types. The RSO has a mandate of the Bali process membership to support members in their efforts to do this. You'll see I've included on this slide reference to the very strong declaration members made at the 2016 Ministerial Conference. That was reaffirmed at the 2018 Ministerial Conference, which in part encouraged members to criminalise migrant smuggling in accordance with relevant international and regional instruments. For practitioners following these issues in our region, I encourage you to familiarise yourself with these declarations. Notwithstanding the region's strong commitment to combating migrant smuggling, like elsewhere in the world, the problem persists. And of course, COVID has not made any of this any easier. While the vast majority of Bali process members are party to the UNTOC, less than half of Bali process members are party to the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. In line with the 2016 declaration, some members that are party to the protocol are in the process of implementing legislative measures against smuggling of migrants, while others that have not yet acceded the protocol have also, nonetheless, taken independent steps in accordance with its requirements. While this is understandable, these differences in approaches can present extra challenges in combating the crime of people smuggling regionally. The RSO is aware that the misunderstandings of what international law of the interpretation of international law on this topic has contributed to these challenges. Following a number of discussions at the Bali Process working group meetings, it was clear that there was a need to strengthen a common understanding of the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol to assist our members, regardless if they've acceded to the protocol or not. Next slide, thanks. And this is, simply what inspired us to develop our publication, which is entitled Understanding the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. I should say here, internally, we debated quite a bit with the title, and that was the most creative one we could come up with. However, I do think you will give some time to our publication and you will agree with us that what it says on the cover is exactly what the document aims to do, and that's give a simple understanding of the SOM Protocol. Produced in partnership, as I said, with UNODC's Regional Office for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, we feel our offering sets out in very simple terms the key requirements of the Smuggling Protocol as they are written. And this includes those relating to the protection of rights of smuggled migrants and requirements for prosecution, prevention, protection and cooperation, which are all shared themes that run throughout the wider Bali process and its various working groups. While our publication was produced with an audience of Bali process member state legislators, policymakers and criminal justice practitioners in mind, we feel it offers anyone an accessible overview and understanding of the protocol, regardless if they're parties to the instrument or not. Hence why I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today to draw attention to our work and the broader work of the Bali process. Final slide, thanks. I think I'm coming in within my 5 minutes, so I'll just flag that our publication is already available now, and this discrete small QR code you'll see on your screen will hopefully take you directly to it on our website. We're really proud to have worked with UNODC as a member of the Bali process in the production of this technical tool, and we look forward to the cooperation that was integral to the development of this tool being carried on in its use in practice. So in closing, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any suggestions or feedback on our publication. We're also interested in hearing from you on suggestions for other language versions that might assist you in the work that you do. Beyond the publication I've shared with you today, if you would like to know more about what we do, or if you have any ideas on how we could collaborate, please reach out. So thank you again. 7 minutes is not long, and Australians are known to speak quite fast, but I hope I've touched on the main points with enough detail. If you share our view that this publication adds value to your work, I encourage you to share it with your counterparts. Thank you again, and I'll hand back to the facilitator.
Many thanks also to you for your capacity of synthesis of complex matters. And again, also this is another tool that indeed require a direct reading to be fully appreciated. And I'm happy now to pass the floor to the fourth and last speaker, that is Mr. Jahangir Alam, Additional Secretary for Political and ICT Matters, Public Security Division at the Ministry of Home Affairs of Bangladesh. I'd like also to stress that Mr. Alam is also playing the role of government focal point for responding to trafficking in persons in Bangladesh, among other important roles. Yes, I would like to pass him the floor. He will present, as said earlier, the early findings of the Bangladesh National Study on Trafficking in Persons, including a chapter on mixed migration flows and the links to smuggling of migrants that has been developed under the GLOAT projects. Please, Mr. Alam. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luciani. Am I clear to all?
Yes, we can hear you well. Yes.
Okay. Thank you again. I am Mr. Jahangir Alam. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. At first, I would like to pay my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to UNODC, IOM, Regional Support Office, the Bali Process, to arrange this webinar session. It's my pleasure to join as a panelist at this important event that provides the opportunity to have a comprehensive discussion on the new rights-based technical cooperation tools to support implementation of the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. Being among the top source countries for migration, Bangladesh is familiar with the increasing challenges posed by human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants. As the 7th largest recipient country of global remittances, Bangladesh has placed highest priority on the protection of migrants' rights and interest both at home and abroad. Safe and regular migration, as well as the dignified return of migrants, is a priority for my government. We recognize the importance of involving stakeholders from all walks of life to create a safe, orderly, and exploitation-free migration environment. We have making significant efforts to eliminate trafficking in persons and reserved criminal smuggling networks. To focus lies on prevention, victim identification and protection, as well as on investigation, prosecution, and adjudication of human traffickers and migrants smugglers. Bangladesh has passed the Prevention and Suppression of Human Trafficking Act in 2012 and its 3 implementing rules in 2017. Acceded to the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime in July 2011 and acceded to the UN Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. Supplementing the Transnational Organized Crime Convention in September 2019. In addition, Bangladesh has adopted the Overseas Employment and Migrants Act in 2013, which seeks to protect the interests of migrants overseas and protect them from exploitation. Bangladesh has also ratified the ILO Core Convention on Forced Labor. Bangladesh has built partnership with the UN and the development partners in its effort to ensure a comprehensive response to migrant smuggling and trafficking in persons, aligning with the global best practices. The Bangladesh government, through the Ministry of Home Affairs, has been spearheading the fight against human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants by coordinating the activities of the concerned ministries, departments, and agencies, with a particular emphasis on the special needs of women and children. Recognizing the importance of collaboration for tangible results, various coordinating committees have been established that comprise interministerial representatives, NGOs, INGOs to work towards combating human trafficking and migrant smuggling in a streamlined way. Also, we have the committees in the district and upazila level to protect irregular migrations. Currently, Bangladesh government, with the support from Global Act project, is conducting a national study on trafficking in persons, including a chapter 1, the occurrence of trafficking in persons in connection with the smuggling of migrants and irregular migration. The crime of trafficking in persons continues to evolve and become more complex with the emergence of new technologies, increasing globalization, and more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic. The overlap between trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants has become more visible. For example, there has been a proliferation of criminal networks that take smuggled migrants as hostages for ransom, which is a form of exploitation. To respond to the need for a solid understanding of the present situation, the study utilizing quantitative and qualitative data collection will provide insight into the extent and characteristics of trafficking in persons as it occurs within and beyond Bangladesh, assisting the development of future programs and interventions by the national authorities. Therefore, overall purpose of the national study is to create the basis for a recurrent reporting system on human trafficking in Bangladesh and to provide an overview and analysis of the main national and regional trafficking in persons trends while providing some insights on its intersections with migrant smuggling and irregular migration. A dedicated research team is working in Bangladesh with support from the Research and Trend Analysis branch of UNODC. IOLI has joined the initiative to provide inputs in preparation of a chapter on human trafficking for the purpose of labor exploitation. To guide the development of the study, Bangladesh government has established an advisory group comprising 12 relevant ministries and governmental departments, while the Ministry of Home Affairs is leading the process. The purpose of the advisory group is to support the coordination and preparation of the study by substantive input and guidance, promote ownership, and ensure validation of results emerging from the research. As of now, the Ministry of Home Affairs organized 2 meetings on the process of the study, on the progress of the study. The study will present the aggregated official statistics to provide a national picture of victim and offenders profile by sex and age detected in Bangladesh. The research team is currently working closely with relevant counterparts to facilitate the data transfer. The analysis will also present the main detected forms of exploitation in the country. Next, the study team is collecting the quality data through application of different data collection methodologies, such as key informant interview, focus group discussion, and the workshop with the criminal justice practitioners. Qualitative analysis will be conducted on perception and experiences of practitioners having direct contact with the victims of trafficking in persons. Profile of victims of trafficking, forms of exploitation, and major trafficking flows will be assessed. As of now, the team organized 3 data collection workshops with the participation by the judges and prosecutors of the recently established anti-human trafficking offense tribunals, investigation officers, from the Criminal Investigation Department and the Police Bureau of Investigation of Bangladesh, and also the relevant officials from the Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Office of the Registrar General of Bangladesh Supreme Court, Office of the Attorney General, Judicial Administration Training Center, and others. The research team has also consulted with numerous stakeholders for the purpose of conducting expert interviews, including with the representative from the civil society, UN agencies and government, ministries, and other departments. It is expected that the study outcome will help the government to take informed decision to respond to human trafficking effectively and will introduce aspects of the counter-smuggling of migrants agenda. We believe that the tools presented today are quite relevant, and once we have finished the mapping analysis from the study, we hope to be in a position to utilize those more suitably. Thanks to all for patience hearing. Please stay home and be safe. Almighty will save us from COVID pandemic 19. God bless us. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Again, thank you all.
Mr. Alam, thank you very much, also in your case, for your capacity to be very concise. And again, this is another brief hint of a study that will be published and will require attentive attention and the development also of actions linked to that. We hope together with you under the Glow Up Bangladesh project. I don't know whether there will be time for having questions to any of the speakers, but I'm afraid we are already well beyond the time that has been given to us for this presentation today. It's a pity that we cannot have a proper discussion, but at the same time, we hope that today we could give a sense of the many actions that are taking place, of the work that at various layers and levels is necessary and is to be done. We all know that below international conventions, there are then there is the work to implement, the work to train those that to have to implement, the work also to clarify gray zones and the practical approaches. All this requires a huge effort, a constant attention by the national authorities, by the international organizations, and because this is the only way to ensure that there is an effective result. Otherwise, signing international conventions doesn't produce by itself the results we want to achieve. As we have said at the beginning, smuggling is an important threat, not simply for the public order of all the countries concerned, but also for the rights, human rights of the migrants, because smuggling always implies putting the migrants at the mercy of criminal organizations that can then, to say the least, put their life and dignity at risk or in dangerous situation, and frequently they can also lead to trafficking or fully fledged exploitation, including up to slavery, up to a certain extent. So it's important to combat against migrant smuggling, and indeed this is producing a double positive result to protect the public order of all the countries involved, at the same time working to protect the migrant rights. Of course, the scope is absolutely not to stop migration, but simply to ensure that this is well managed. This takes place through regular channels. This is the only way to achieve positive solutions for all the parties involved. The European Union is very proud to having contributed to this event today and to the preparation of some of the documents presented today. But in any case, we are very proud to have so many partners and to work with all of you in bringing our contribution to this challenge that is global. It doesn't concern just a certain part of the world, but it's present and very important all over the world. And indeed, everyone has to take the responsibility to bring the contribution to this common challenge. I think with this, I can conclude today, and thanking again our 4 speakers for their presentation, inviting all the audience to go directly now to the documents that have been very efficiently presented today, and looking forward also to read the study once it will be completed that is being carried out in Bangladesh. Thanks, many thanks to all of you again, and I wish to all of you a nice continuation of the day, depending on the time where you are located at the moment. Many thanks. Have a nice day, all of you.
Have a nice day. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.